Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher
Vitzatna,
kivanu
Vitzatanu,
so be great Torah. Amen. Okay, so let's. I think this is short enough that one person can do the whole thing.
I'll
Should we
read.
wait or should, okay. If you get tired, let me know.
All right, well, let's start then.
Okay, bitter herbs. A Jew and a German once traveled together as friends. In order that the compassionate Jews would have compassion on him, the Jew taught the German how to act like a Jew, for even the languages are similar. As Passover approached, the Jew taught the German how to behave when, when he would be invited to Passover Seder. He explained to him about Kiddush, about washing the hands, but he forgot to tell him about the bitter herbs. The German arrived to the Seder famished after a long day, anticipating eating all the good foods that the Jew had told him about. However, they gave him only a little piece of celery and salt water, as is customary for the Seder. Then they began reciting the how do you say it?
Haggadah.
Haggadah, while he was pining for the meal. When they finally began eating the matzah, he was relieved. But immediately after they gave him the bitter herbs, leaving him with a painfully pungent taste in his mouth. He thought that this was the entire meal and that this was all they were going to eat. So he ran out of the house, bitter and hungry, saying to himself, those cursed Jews, after all that ceremony, that's what they give me to eat. So he returned to the study hall and went to sleep. Later, the Jew returned with a glowing face, satiated from eating and drinking. How was the Seder for you? He asked the German. The German vented his anger, after which the Jew said, you foolish German, had you only waited just a little longer, you would have eaten a scrumptious meal like I had. The same is true regarding the service of God, especially when one is working to serve God by following the advice of Rabbi Nachman. After all the toil and effort one goes through in order to come closer to the Rabbi and divine service, one is given some bitter herbs in order to refine the body's grossness. But the person thinks that he will have to endure this bitterness forever, that it is all about bitterness, so he runs away. But if one would have a bit of patience and endure just this bit of bitterness to refine the body, one would then experience all types of spiritual pleasures. That's how it is in serving God. One must first endure some bitter herbs to refine the body, but then one will experience the pleasure.
Okay. All right, so I'm sure I don't have to explain to anybody the role of the bitter herbs in the Passover Seder. Um, well, we probably should just say that there are a number of things traditionally that bitter herbs represent. Can anybody recall any of them?
The bitter life we have led.
Yeah, the bitterness of slavery, right?
In the history, yeah.
Yeah, that's the main one that people refer to. So, why do you think this is set up as the Jew instructing the German about about Judaism in general, about the Passover Seder in particular? It's kind of an odd what I want to say premise.
Well, I think it's about the stranger and treating the stranger with compassion. And
There is a special role for that in the Passover Seder.
Yeah, when we opened the door and let Eliyahu in.
Right. We say, let all who are hungry come and eat.
Mhm.
I don't know. I have never had anybody walk in my door at a Passover Seder at that point or any other point in the Seder itself. But I guess sometimes maybe it might. What is the
It's Kerry. This year it will be Uber Eats with the dinner.
oh yeah, okay, good point. Good point. All right, so why would this um, sort of set off this angry response in the German? There's something about experiencing or eating the bitter herbs that is uh,
Well,
difficult or offensive.
he's not seeing the whole picture. But
He's not seeing the whole picture. Yes, that is true. And what he's missing is the role that's played by uh, bitterness in helping us to appreciate the,
Hmm.
the meal, the sumptuous meal itself.
I would even say that there's a connection between every day and the Sabbath. In
what
the
way?
sense, well, the laboring of every day is in a sense a bitter herb.
Okay. And so it leads us to appreciate the Sabbath more because of the contradiction. Yeah, Judith, what did you want to say?
Well, I know this is the story, but certainly very close to the time one eats bitter herbs, one
Yes.
also gets the horosis, and he doesn't get the horosis.
That's true.
But
Uh,
why?
That's true. He doesn't get the process, or at least there's no indication that he does. Once he gets the herbs, the German kind of gets angry and stalks out. Um, celery stalks, yes. But um, he thinks mistakenly that the point of the Passover Seder is the festive meal that goes along with it. He doesn't think that there's a point in the ritual elements of the Seder. He's kind of there with a set of confused expectations. Um, the reason that the Seder is meaningful escapes him. Not so surprisingly, you might say that the Jews are used to what do I say? That if there is any gratification to be had, it's delayed. What kinds of things might there be in the Jewish tradition that would underscore or support the idea that delayed gratification is an important feature of Jewish life and one that Jews get used to and even becomes important in and of itself? What's the biggest thing?
Lashana haba b'Yisrael, b'Yerushalayim.
Yeah,
Means
okay.
no matter how bad it is now,
Yeah,
next year we're going to be in Jerusalem.
that's true. That's a very, very good insight. So we recognize that there is delayed gratification, that in fact there's supposed to be delayed gratification, and not just in the course of the Seder itself, but year after year after year. We keep going back, to do the Seder again, and still no Yerushalayim, as you're indicating. So that's one very appropriate in the context of the Seder element of delayed gratification. All right.
So there's another a thing that comes to mind, Rabbi Baker.
Sure.
I think about what it is that we're doing in Mussar or any kind of spiritual pursuit. And you mean for the Buddhists, I have to sit with my legs crossed? For whatever it is, you mean I have to really look at a particular personality trait of mine? I've always tried to suppress that. I don't want to look at that now. And
Yeah.
I think the whole point of this is that there is the possibility of a great meal if we persist in this, or we can just run away.
I think it's a very good point.
Yeah, it's not at all just a Jewish thing. I mean,
No, I know.
there's a story that the Japanese carpenter spends 90% of his time sharpening his tool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just goes through, or someone having to practice scales if they want to be a musician. I mean, it just goes through everything or
It does go through everything. I was thinking of a child learning how to read. It's, for most kids, many kids, it's really a chore to learn how to read and to pronounce the words and et cetera, but the gratification when one knows how to read is well, as far as I'm concerned, phenomenal.
Sure. These are all very good examples of delayed gratification. But there is a big one that in Judaism that you've missed.
well, the 40-year. Are you referring to the 40-year before going to the Promised Land?
That's another good example of delayed gratification.
And the bitter waters at one of the wells
Yes.
that needs to be turned into sweet water.
Kerry, we need help. Tell us.
It's the coming of the Messiah.
Oh,
All of
Thank
these
you.
are good examples, but they're, in my opinion, they are subsumed under the general heading of salvation, the redemption of the world, for which we wait all the time, every day, every moment, and we wait for the coming of the Messiah, if we think in those terms, and who still hasn't come after thousands of years. Now,
But the interesting aspect of that, Kerry, is that people still believe that it will happen.
yes,
Whereas, for the Passover meal, you can smell it, so you know it's going to happen.
Roasted chicken.
Yes.
yeah.
especially if you have a master chef in the kitchen.
Yes, our turkey arrived yesterday.
Boiled chicken, make the chicken soup, and you eat the chicken itself, which is a disappointment after the soup. Yeah, we say we wait for the Messiah, and even though he tarry, still we believe.
Mhm.
Even though he what? I didn't get that word.
Carries.
Even though he tarries, the Messiah.
I don't understand the word carries.
No, tarry with a T.
Oh,
Even though he tarries, taking good sweet time to come, we still believe in in the coming.
But there's a problem, kind of not a people. Some people take a lot of. They're very proud of the fact that they're martyrs.
Yes.
So that's the other approach is this isn't about taking pride in suffering.
No, no. In fact,
But it's very close to that for some people.
I think this is a very good point that requires a little bit more explanation or investigation. Just how close are happiness and sadness to each other, or meaning or confusion to each other? How far apart are they? How close are they?
They're just a flimsy veil from each other.
Yeah. Tell me more about what you mean.
Well, the thing about a veil is that it's translucent. And
Yes.
if you're very fortunate, you can look through the veil to see the other side.
Yes.
It's so easy to go from being happy to being sad and vice versa, from feeling empowered and to feeling helpless.
I'm going to mention that there is a famous midrash about salvation or redemption, which basically goes, how close are they? All you have to do is turn around. And you are in the other world, the other circumstances.
Yeah.
Not moving from where you are, but just turning your direction is really all that's required to experience the other dimension. So in this case, what is the difference? The Jew says, well, if you had only waited a few moments, you would have experienced this sumptuous meal, but you left too soon. How does this relate to one's personal development or particularly spiritual development?
Well, in fact, sometimes people talk about spiritual development, that the closer you get to, I'm going to use the analogy I used before, the other side of the veil,
Yeah.
the thicker the veil becomes.
More.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that particularly before, but it makes sense.
No, I just made it up. That's why you hadn't heard it before.
That's why I hadn't heard it before.
I don't understand that. Where are you coming from, Michael?
Well,
I'll give an example.
As one uncovers those things that have been in our way, they fight back in a way that is more and more strenuous.
Here's a good example. Right now, we're closer to ending the pandemic than we ever have been. And people are, I just talked with my trainer, and she was at physical therapy, and she was saying everyone there is talking about the big Thanksgiving celebration they're having.
Really?
Oh,
yes.
God. Oh, God.
So that's an example of how difficult it is at the end just to wait a little bit longer.
Yeah.
The veil getting thicker.
Good.
I just saw an interview that Chris Cuomo, of all people, did with Bill Gates. Exactly on this point, because Gates is very involved in support of and helping the effort to develop a vaccine. And here we are on the verge of the vaccine being available, but we are likely to experience a a relapse in terms of the general uh, condition that people have with regard to the pandemic, because everybody is thinking that they can, especially because there is a vaccine about to come, that they can have their traditional get-togethers with their crazy political uncles and so on and so forth. And it's going to set us back.
Yep.
And it's,
That's the way it.
We're already back.
Yeah, we take 2 steps forward and we go 1 step back. That's life.
Yeah. Or in this case,
The other
2
way
steps
around.
forward and 3 steps back.
yeah. I mean, I'm not sure that we're still getting a net gain here, but I suppose we are. It's hard to see that. But how does this relate to one's personal development, spiritual or emotional or whatever? How does this, all of this is right on the money. Specifically, how does that relate to the subject of Mussar?
So let me give you an example.
Sure.
People who are bipolar
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly feel euphoric, or they feel better,
Yes.
and they decide that it's okay to stop taking their medicine.
It's a good example. It's a very good example. And of course, then they relapse into their earlier state of being.
Yeah.
So when such a person makes some progress,
Mm-hmm.
it's in a way kind of a kind of delusion. Making some progress emotionally or spiritually or what have you might make us think that the condition of despair or unhappiness or dysfunction has now evaporated. But in fact, the idea that we think that that is so is part of the dysfunction. So we get.
I think it's so interesting that we have this notion that there is some place to get.
Uh-huh.
But as you pointed out, turning around in the exact place you are,
Yes.
all there really is.
Yes. And
When I mention making progress on my journey, Kim frequently points out, what do you mean journey?
well, but it is a journey, but it's not a journey which has an actual endpoint.
Right.
It doesn't even have a path except in retrospect of where you've traveled. It's not like you're looking ahead and you see the straight line and you go down the road.
Right. No, that's true. And in fact, as you look back on the path that you've taken, at different points when you look back on the path in which you've taken, you see the path in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I keep thinking of walking in the snow.
All right.
Because you can't see any path except looking back.
But even so, when you look back once and then maybe sometime later you look back again, what you see is not the same as you saw the first time or the previous time.
Folks, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have to go because I have a work meeting that got called, and I need to prepare for it. So thank you so much for the teaching, and
Sure. Well, thank you.
Sorry that I'm going to miss it.
Sorry.
Happy Thanksgiving with your big crowd.
Well, it's all right.
Okay.
So anyway, what I was about to get into was this idea that we, in the process of trying to grow, we get seduced by the idea of progress or growth itself. Now, when you think, okay, I've attacked this problem and I have made progress with regard to my my nemesis emotions whatever they may happen to be, that's exactly when we have, by definition, a relapse.
So what is the difference between a relapse and stopping to smell the roses?
Well, that's a good question. I never thought of it quite in that way before. I think, I guess, with what I'm trying to get at is that growth is not a process where you achieve a certain level and then you remain there. You can, by looking at your own progress, delude yourself into thinking that you have become, that you've overcome whatever the midah is that you're considering, without recognizing that it remains on your agenda. It doesn't get solved. It doesn't get overcome at a particular point and then goes away. It remains an issue for you, which you have learned to handle in some more effective way. But if you think that you have somehow overcome it and it's not a problem anymore, that's by definition not having overcome it.
It's kind of like going the wrong way on an escalator.
Oh, okay.
You can't stop.
That's right. You keep going, and the escalator keeps going.
Yeah. You got to keep going.
Well, yeah, that's true.
You stop and you're brought back down to the ground floor.
And I think what, as a related point, it is our own ability, our own inclination to think that spiritual growth is about the overcoming of problems rather than learning how to deal with issues in our personalities that are ongoing issues. That gets us confused and diminishes whatever progress we have made. We are constantly relapsing because we think we have made, that the issue is overcoming and solving a problem, not identifying an ongoing state of being. Now,
we have this view too that if only this problem was solved, then all things would be well.
Oh, sure. I used to have an idea that occurred to me regularly when I was a boy, that what I needed was a smart pill. That if I could just take a smart pill, then my problems would be solved because I would be smart all the time.
There's a guy who studies happiness.
Yeah.
And he talked about who is happier a year after it happens. A guy who wins, someone who wins a $365 million lottery, or someone who turns into a paraplegic. And after a year, these people both rate their happiness the same.
That's interesting. Okay.
That is interesting. I wouldn't think so, but I know the statistics on people winning lotteries.
They don't do too well, do they?
They don't do too well.
Well, typically they lose their money within a short amount of time.
But I think that the escalator concept is not really a good one, because I don't think we go back to bottom. I think it's more like a pleat. You go forward and you go back, but you're still going forward. So I'm wiser now than I was when I was a teenager. I'm wiser now than I was 20 years ago. And so are you. And as far as the happiness thing is concerned, the wonderful statistic with that is older people are happier than younger people, even though we have aches and pains and issues.
I think it's a matter of how long we stay still. You know, like I've been tracking my weight now for a few months. I'm doing this Noom program,
Oh,
and it's very interesting. But so it either, you know, usually it kind of either stays the same or goes down, but sometimes it goes up. But I can see that if I went off the program, it would go back up 5 pounds.
What's the program?
It's a like a behavior modification eating deal.
Okay.
Noom, L-N-O-O-M. They advertise a lot on TV.
I've seen those ads. Yeah, they're the ads are impressive because the weight losses are realistic. Yeah, you watch these things, whether it's on television or some other medium. Say, oh, I lost 50 pounds. I lost 100 pounds. I lost 150 pounds. You think, oh my God, that's really remarkable. But
It's not speed. It's not speed dieting.
No, it is a lifestyle change.
And that's really what we're talking about here with the Mussar.
Yeah, lifestyle change.
That's a very good point, because the signposts, the marks of progress are not static. You notice you make progress day by day in a particular area, and you notice another day you are.
There's my progress.
Oh,
You
you're
know,
way progress.
so it's a downward slope.
Yeah.
Why do you have to lose weight, Kim? You look.
Well, when I came here, I was 150. That's my goal. Anyway, I probably would be fine not, but that's my ideal weight.
All right.
It's also like a practice that I'm doing.
You just sort of anticipated the next point I wanted to make. That is, this is the story and the whole question of personal or spiritual progress is about discipline. It's the practice is as important as the outcome or as the effect. You know, if you are making progress, it may not be because you've lost 5 pounds. Maybe your weight is the same, but it's a different same than it would be otherwise in the absence of the discipline. So you have the Seder meal, and you have all the ritual elements of the Seder meal first, and afterwards you have the festive meal, okay, which is exactly the way it should be, because the whole point of going through the discipline is that leads you to the sumptuous meal at the end. But you have to do the discipline, you have to do the work.
Also, Fulber gave a great talk about all the different ways that things repeat in Judaism. For example, this repeats every year.
Yes.
So you have the festive meal, but then you go back to something else that you have to go wait for a year, and then you get the festive meal again.
Well, that's
Okay.
because the festive meal itself doesn't change, but you're looking at it from a different perspective each year.
Well, when you back up too, yeah. You think that you got everything, that life is great. I've had this festive meal, and then you realize tomorrow I won't have that. I have to wait another year.
This is part of the delayed gratification idea that I started out by talking about. In my house, my mother, and to a greater extent my grandmother, made the food for the Passover Seder meal. And every year, the recipe was the menu was the same. There was potato kugel, there was gefilte fish, there was chicken soup, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there was always a part of the ritual, like my grandmother would say, you know, I don't think the matzo balls are as good as they were last year.
That's because she didn't make them out of a package. The package is always the same.
Well, that's probably true. But it's true. She didn't use a package. It's also true. But it doesn't matter whether they were better or worse. Who remembers? They were great the first time. They're great the second time. It's what you're rating is your memory, not the actual matzo balls. You know, but so my point is the ritual of eating the meal had one component was the rating of the matzo balls. You know what I'm saying? That was as much a part of the meal, the experience of the meal, as the actual eating of the matzo balls. You know, so the point for us in terms of spiritual discipline is that the matzo balls may not actually be any difference. Who knows if they really are or not? But we judge them, we rate them, we have a point of view about them, and having that point of view about them is as much a part of the process of growth as anything else. You know, so my grandmother would say, I don't think the matzo balls are as good this year as they were last year. And somebody else would say, oh no, they're certainly as good, maybe even better. And that was the conversation that went on. The point was my grandmother wanted somebody to say, these matzo balls are very good. You know, but to do that in a way that was defensible, she said, I don't know how good they are. I don't think they're so good compared to last year. And somebody would say, oh no, Grandma, they're even better than last year.
So she was fishing.
she was gefilte fishing. That's true. One of my absolute favorite movies is a movie that Gregory Peck won an Academy Award for. What is the actual name of the movie? To Kill a Mockingbird. And there's a scene where he walks down the street coming home from work, and Jem and Scout, the two children, are there with him, and they cross this. They walk down the street in front of the home of this curmudgeonly old woman who is always making snide comments about the behavior of his children, and he charms her by saying, this will be the show place of the town. And she says, well, I don't think the roses are as nice as they were last year. And he says, they are every bit as nice. They're beautiful. And the gardens at Bellingrad have nothing on your yard. Okay. And it's a charming little part of the movie, but you know, it's not as dramatic as some other parts of the movie, but it's one of my favorite parts of the movie because it points up exactly this point, that being reassured that growth has taken place, that positive change has taken place is part of what we need in terms of feedback from other people. And it doesn't really matter what the actual state of the matzo balls is or the actual state of the roses is. we are looking for validation from other people, and we play this little dance, which if anybody was asked to comment on just in a general sort of way, they would recognize that it's formalistic. It's not, you know, there is no suspense about it. You know, the question is going to be asked. I don't know if the roses look as nice this year as last year. Oh no, Miss So-and-so. I don't think the gardens at Bellingrad has anything on your yard. Your yard is going to be the showplace of the town. Okay. This is exactly what is expected, both in terms of the question and in terms of the answer. The delusion comes in when we think that this is a static process. It's not a static process. The support has to happen every year under those circumstances. It has to be reaffirmed again and again that we have passed a certain mark, that we have made a certain accomplishment, whatever. We constantly need to be reminded that we have done so.
So if there's nobody around to remind us, and we're making this steady progress,
Yes.
how do we feel about that? Or do we need that reassurance? Well, that whole question. Can we do this on our own? Are we hermits?
Well, that's a very good question. And I think in the end, it's a kind of endless loop that we can't get out of. Would it be better if we didn't need the reiteration of our progress? Maybe it would. But the reiteration of our progress comes in response to a question. And the question is, am I on the right track? Have I made progress in the direction that I want to go? I've used this metaphor many times, but I'll use it again. I have no shame at all. In regards to the Apollo moon landing, the percentage of the time that the ship was on target was 5%. The rest of the time, it's course correcting.
It was coming and going.
Yeah. So now does that mean that it was on track or not on track? Well,
That's not it.
Scam likely again. There is no process in human life which is a straight line, which is where you take a step, where you make certain progress, and that's all. Then you just take the next step. You are constantly going backwards and forwards and needing to be reassured or to receive correction so that you know that you are on the right path, that you're going in the right direction. So if you could look at that and say, well, it's some kind of insecurity. And I suppose it is. But the insecurity is built into the process of growth. You never know how much progress you've made or if some step you've taken is actual process or not on your own.
So you have to pass landmarks at least and see if those landmarks, how many times you pass the landmark. Are you looking back at the landmark? Are you looking ahead at the landmark?
Yes.
So that's the loop.
That's the loop. And what is, it is kind of a pernicious loop in the sense that you could say it would be better if I were more independent. Yeah. If I were less, uh, I had less need for someone else to validate my experience. But the point of growth is that it doesn't take place in a vacuum. It takes place always in a social milieu. Otherwise, how would you know whether you're making progress or not? You're making progress in relation to your behavior with regard to your total social field, and not just as if you were in isolation. So uh, I think in the end you have to say that checking in with other people is a good part of the process and not a sign of weakness or defectiveness or what have you.
It's not just other people, but it's the environment too, the earth, and we're getting feedback all the time. Like, what's the quality of the air?
That is
how many species have become extinct? That kind of stuff.
Yes, all of those things are markers of where we are on the pathway. And it is inevitable that from time to time, we're going to notice that we are behind where we were.
Yeah.
But the whole point of noticing that you're behind where you were is that you have to have made some steps in the right direction to notice. So it's not that it's good that there's been a regression, but simply that the regression is as much a sign of what progress has been made as anything else. So it's easy for this reason to fall into a state of despair or aggravation or dissatisfaction when we notice that we haven't overcome something, that it's still an issue with us that we have to continually struggle with. But the point, it seems to me, of having made spiritual or personal progress, of having grown, is that we recognize that there are things that we have to continually struggle with, and that they don't disappear from our lives. They are maybe off stage for a little while, but that's all that they are, and they are continually something that we have to be vigilant about.
So the German gave up too early. He didn't see the goal, and that's something that might happen to us too. If we might give up.
I think that is hitting the nail right on the head. I think the point is it is a universal weakness that human beings have, and the not so subtle, but maybe subtle value in the story is that the Jew is trying to teach the German how it is to be a Jew. And that lesson doesn't really come through because it's an historical and social lesson. If you haven't had the experience, it seems kind of ridiculous.
So it's not really that cool that the Jew is able to wait because he knows that there's going to be this big feast.
That's right.
And now I'm thinking about what's the name of the man who walked into the parting waters up to here?
Oh, Nachman ben Aminadav.
Yeah. So we talked before a few weeks ago about how that was such, if he had had faith that it would be okay, it wouldn't have been such a thing that he did.
Yes.
He risked everything in doing it.
And if you risk everything and everything is on the line, then it it doesn't, you are learning to live with the uncertainty of knowing where you are on this gigantic pathway of growth and development. If you want to know where you are on that road, you want to be able to mark it off. You know, okay, I'm 100 feet further down the road or 200 feet further down the road. You've missed the point, because the road is always much longer than whatever progress you have made. And
The uncertainty is always there.
yes,
You never know.
I think that's the point. So the positive view is to recognize the existence of this discrepancy between where you are and where you would like to be and where you have been. If you think that you have somehow erased that differential, you've missed the point. You know, so it's I've always found the metaphor of the asymptote in mathematics be very helpful. You have a multivalent equation, you stick your values in, and you get a line that curves gradually towards one of the axes, and it gets infinitesimally, I can't say that, close to the axis, but it doesn't ever reach it. That's where we are. And that point is always very, very close or infinitely far. Same point, same time, same situation.
But it's never there.
No, because there is no there. There's only the constant reinsertion of new variables, new values in the variable equation, and that there's an infinity of change each time you do that. We're infinitely closer, and we're infinitely further behind.
Well, it kind of, from a Buddhist perspective, it's a little different, I think, and that is that there's a difference between what is and how we'd like things to be.
Uh-huh.
And what we can depend upon is things are going to be as they are.
That's right.
And so our dissatisfaction is simply that they're not as they are.
Well, they're not as we would like them to be.
Or, they're not as we'd like them to be. They are as they are.
Yes. Yes. And the interesting part of that, it's a very, very good point, is that it doesn't matter where, as it were, on the graph you are, no matter where you are on that asymptote, it's the same in that regard at every point on the asymptote. We are infinitely far and infinitely close at every point.
So the crux is that we must keep moving.
That's the only alternative that you have. If you decide that you have reached some end goal, then the process has stopped. And you're stuck. And when you're stuck, what happens? Well, you're not a happy guy. When you're stuck, that's exactly what you've been fighting against, and what led to this whole thing to begin with. You feel stuck, and you don't want to be stuck. You want to be making progress. But when you make progress, you recognize that making progress only means that you're at a different point on the asymptote, not that you are in fact closer or further away from your goal. You're at a different place, but each place that you look at, you're infinitely far or infinitely close to where you want to be.
But isn't there an importance in pausing to reassess, etc.? So
Yes,
staying in the same place is okay,
Well, isn't that the Sabbath?
one would hope.
I think that that's a very, very insightful point. Yeah, I mean, the idea is that there is this ongoing process, which we call Meleket Avodah. It means literally the work, the work of work, so to speak. And we are doing this all the time, every day. But you have to also reach a point or transform a point into viewing what has been happening.
Right.
So you're not always doing a Meleket Avodah. You are sometimes taking the view of what does this process mean? Where am I in this process? What change has taken place? And so on and so forth, even though the answer to none of those questions is definitive, and none of those questions leads you to a final answer. So you have, I mean, it is a kind of conundrum. How can it be valuable to pause and look at what it is you have been engaged in if you can never see that point as the end of the process? And there is no end to the process. Some people would regard that as being a kind of cruel joke that God is playing on humankind. But it's really not. It is a joke, but it's the joke of self-realization. You realize that you are in fact a fool.
That reminds me of the Buddhist story that Kim can probably tell a lot better than I. You're between a tiger and a cliff.
Okay.
And Kim, you know that story, right?
Yeah, there's Christian versions too, and with you praying to God but in the Buddhist story, you realize you can't go down, you can't go up, and then there's a strawberry, and then you reach and you eat the strawberry, and it's so good.
And that's it. Till the next life.
Yeah.
So that's kind of going to what is, as opposed to what you'd like it to be. And we see this with people who are dying. There's like an immense joy that they have, and all of a sudden, in every moment, in every connection, you would think that they would be so distraught because they were dying, and I haven't observed that. People on their deathbed.
Well,
It does happen.
I can tell you from my experience dealing with patients who are dying or in the end stages of life, that there are plenty of them who are not happy.
Oh, okay. I need to go.
Well, it's time to end anyway.
We will go.
But not that I'll die. I'm dying. I'm just.
Didn't think that that's what you meant.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
so
thank you both. What a treasure this is.
Thank you.
True.
It's 1 o'clock.
There you
Okay.
go. All right. Thank you both very much.
Next week.
With it.
Next.
Yes. Next week is Motzei Thanksgiving. Are we meeting?
I'd like to. How about you?
I'm willing.
Okay.
Me too.
I'm not having a big party.
Okay.
Well, we're going to meet. We're going to not meet for the Torah study on Thursday, but
Right.
we'll meet on Friday for this class.
Okay. Thank
Thank you
you.
all very much.
Bye.
Bye bye.